Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming you guys. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Welcome to everyone online as well who's joining. Today is the first day of a 5-day course that I'm teaching that it's titled Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment. This is where I'm going to be helping students to be able to develop a foundation of all the, kind of baseline teachings that the Buddha shared that really helps you to get onto the path to enlightenment. It's a real nice foundation that over the next 5 days, you're going to be learning all different types of things. And I'm going to introduce you to the course after we do our meditation. I usually start with meditation to help you guys to learn a bit about meditation. You guys have all meditated with me before. So I'm just going to do the chanting to ease into the meditation. And then I'll guide you during the meditation. There'll be a period of time of quietness. Then we'll come out of that with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll introduce you to the course. And today we're actually going to be learning multiple things. I'm going to share with you the life story of the Buddha, what is enlightenment, and then after lunch, I'm going to teach Buddhist chanting. So if you guys would like to join for meditation, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to start with the chanting, and then afterwards, I'll come back with the guidance. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Sama Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะขวาโอตังมะขวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเควตาตัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเควโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมรัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมรัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมรัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเควาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังปุตโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone. Nice to see everyone here this morning. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. This is the first day of a 5-day course where I'm going to help students to develop a foundation in the path to enlightenment. What I'm going to do here in a moment is just introduce you to the course so you shall understand what it is that you'll be learning throughout the 5 days. Then the first talk for this morning, I'm going to share with you the life story of the Buddha. We're going to take a mid-morning break, and then when we come back, I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment so that you understand this goal that the Buddha has in order to help you to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. Then we're going to take a lunch break for about an hour and a half, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to teach chanting. So I'll show you guys this the full aspects of the course that I'm going to be sharing with you guys, but that's just what we're going to be doing today. Okay. So the course meets from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. each day. Generally, we start at 9 a.m. each day, and then we generally end around 3. This is my contact information if you guys need to contact me for any reason. This is more so for, after class. If you guys are coming to class and you're going to be here, great. I'll teach you. If you're not going to be here, that's fine too. You don't need to contact me and let me know that you're not going to be here. It's not like I'm taking attendance or anything like that, right? But this information is helpful for you after class because nobody's going to get to enlightenment in 5 days. And as you need help, you have a way to reach out to get help. And all this information is on our website too. So if you ever lose this for any reason, you have it on the website. In terms of the way our course is structured is each morning we start with chanting and meditation at 9 a.m. So you'll see that I'll do that as we get started each morning. Then by about 9:30, we'll start sharing teachings about the path to enlightenment. Some people would refer to this as a Dhamma talk. The word Dhamma means teachings, or so it's a talk about the teachings. The way that I see this is it's more of a discussion where I'm sharing with you the teachings of the Buddha, and then you're asking questions to be able to understand the teachings and gain clarity on them. It's not a lecture, it's not a sermon, it's none of that kind of stuff. It's more of a discussion, me helping you to be able to understand the the path and you being able to ask questions. As I mentioned, we take a mid-morning break, usually somewhere around 10:30 to 11. That fluctuates depending on the topic that we're talking about. And then we generally take a lunch at 12, but each time it's a little bit different. So I will tell you at lunchtime when we're going to come back and when I'm going to start teaching again. And then I generally start teaching again at 1:30, but sometimes it's a little bit different. You guys will see how that goes. And in the afternoon, I'm usually teaching you something about meditation. Today it's going to be chanting, which is helping you to get more benefit out of the meditation. Tomorrow is going to be the ins and outs of breathing mindfulness meditation, helping you to understand all the details of that. On Wednesday, it's going to be walking meditation. So you guys will see each afternoon it's more about meditation. And we actually do meditation in the afternoon too. So if you're coming to class each day, you're going to be meditating twice, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. And if you'd like to get another one in the evening, that would be really helpful for you to really build up the momentum for your meditation practice. And then we generally finish around 3 p.m. each day. Again, a little bit different each day, maybe a little bit earlier, a little bit later, just depends on what's going on. All of this builds for 4 days. And then on the 5th day, I invite you guys out to a field trip where we go to 2 different temples. We go to a forest temple called Wat Umong, and then we go to a temple up on the mountain called Wat Doi Sitep. And I tour students around teaching them the artwork, architecture, and symbolism of the teachings, because the Buddha used this type of thing to help his students to be able to remember the teachings and help them to bring it to the forefront of their mind. So I kind of walk around the temple. It's kind of like a classroom without walls where I'm helping students to be able to understand the artwork, architecture, and symbolism. So now when you visit these 2 temples, if you visit other temples throughout your life, you'll actually understand. It'll have more meaning for you. It's almost like the temple walls will speak to you. When Thai people go on holiday, like say they're from Chiang Mai and they go to Phuket, they're usually going to integrate some of the time to go visit some temples while they're down in Phuket, for example, right? And now they go around and they look around, and it's almost like a little scavenger hunt where you're kind of looking to see, what are these people trying to communicate? Because a lot of these temples were built 500 years ago, 700 years ago, and you can see, what were they trying to communicate with this artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism. So if you understand that kind of stuff, when you go to the temples, it'll actually have more meaning for you. So I'll invite you guys out to that. And there'll be other people who will probably join us too that aren't even here, because I allow people to just come to that if they would like to come. They don't necessarily have to come to the whole course. So if you guys see people throughout your week and they'd like to come, they're more than welcome to come. And I'll give you guys more details on this as we get closer to it. Probably on Thursday afternoon, I'll give you guys all the details about the field trip. In terms of how the course is structured, it's based on this first book of our book series. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. You can actually get this for free. It's the first book of a 13-book book series, and I'm going to be teaching all of these chapters, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 19. This book is available in PDF. You can actually download it for free from our website. You can take it and go print it yourself if you like. We have printed versions here that students just reimburse us for the printing cost, so we can go purchase more for other people. But it's also available on Amazon too. If you have access to Amazon, if you'd like a Kindle version or a print version, it's available there as well. It's helpful if you acquire this book, because there's certain things that are in the book that aren't in the class, and there's certain things that are in the classes that aren't in the book. So the combination of the two will really help you. In each talk that I give, I will share with you, you'll see it on the slide, what chapter it's from. So that way you'll know what chapter it is that I'm teaching from. So this book will really help you. And there's more there than just these chapters, but this is like the foundational part of the teachings of the Buddha. That's why I'm covering these particular chapters as part of the course. The topics that I'm going to be covering is, first, I'm going to share the life story of the Buddha, because if you're interested in getting to enlightenment and understanding his teachings, it'd be nice to know a bit about his life story. So I'm going to start with that this morning. Then after our mid-morning break, I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment, because if you're going to make your way to enlightenment, it's important to know what the goal is so that you can then more easily navigate your way to it. Like if I came to you and said, hey guys, I'm going to go to Chiang Rai. Would you like to go to Chiang Rai? Well, if you don't know what Chiang Rai is, the first thing you'd be probably say is, well, what is Chiang Rai, right? Because now you can understand what it is so that you can even decide whether this is a place that you'd like to go to. And then I'd be like, oh, it's a city in the north. It's about 3 hours north of Chiang Mai. We got to go through the mountains. And when we get there, you're going to see this, you're going to see that, you're going to see this and that. And you're like, oh, okay. So now if you decide to go to Chiang Rai, you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you arrive, you'll actually know that you've arrived. So it's the same thing with enlightenment. If you didn't know what enlightenment is, you wouldn't be able to navigate your way to it. And then once you get there, you wouldn't even know what it is, then that you've actually arrived. So by understanding what enlightenment is, you'll actually be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And then when your mind is enlightened, you'll actually know that it's actually enlightened. So I'm going to share that with you as part of our talks this morning. Then tomorrow, I'm going to be sharing with you the Four Noble Truths, establishing right view. We're going to walk through that in a detailed sense. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha that's going to help you in 4 simple statements to understand the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is where people would start. When the Buddha would teach the students, they would start with this teaching. So we're going to do that tomorrow, as well as the Eightfold Path, because the Four Noble Truths is actually part of the Eightfold Path. I'm going to spend the entire morning teaching the Eightfold Path. And of course, we're going to take a mid-morning break as well, but it takes a good 2.5 hours to teach this particular teaching because it's a core central teaching of the Buddha. And you're going to need to learn it multiple times, inside and out, backwards and forwards. You're going to ultimately need to commit it to your memory, but tomorrow I'm going to share this with you based in the original words of the Buddha. I'll show you what he actually taught on this particular topic. Then on Wednesday morning, I'm going to teach you transforming the 3 poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a high-level way to understand the pollutions in the mind, where the Four Noble Truths gives you like a little window into the unenlightened mind. The 3 poisons kind of broaden your understanding, and it deepens your understanding of what's really going on in the unenlightened mind, and provide you solutions as well of how to fix it. Then I'm going to teach you the 5 precepts. If you've heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, the Buddha actually didn't teach that. That's not his teachings. That's very rudimentary understanding of what he actually taught. It sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments. I'm going to actually use the original words of the Buddha on these 5 precepts and help you to be able to see what they're doing for you in terms of training of your mind. So I will share that with you on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, I'm going to share with you what is Gama and how does it affect you. This is the natural law that you're awakening to. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, you're cultivating wisdom about this natural law. We could really say everything and anything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. But on Thursday, I'm going to go in and talk about this specifically. But everything he taught in one way or another is really coming back to this natural law. So I'm going to help you to demystify this natural law, because sometimes people think of it as punishments and rewards or something mystical or magical or, something that somebody's controlling. This isn't actually true. You're going to be able to see what is the natural law of Gama and how does it actually affect you. And ultimately, I'm going to teach you 4 types of Gama. There's actually 4 different types, and I'm going to teach you how to extinguish all your unwholesome Gama, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome Gama. So you need to know these 4 types of Gama and how to extinguish your unwholesome Gama. So I'm going to teach you that on Thursday morning. Then I'm going to teach you what is merit. This is something that you need to learn. It's actually a specific type of Gama. And then I'm going to teach you how to receive continued support on the path to enlightenment, because you're going to need continued ongoing support. And I'll show you how to be able to do that. In terms of your meditation practice, I'm going to be teaching you breathing mindfulness meditation. We're going to be doing it multiple times throughout the course, but then on Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to teach you all the ins and outs of it, so you see how it fits into the overall path to enlightenment and what it's actually doing for you and the goals of it. And then I'm going to be sharing with you the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions, because you're going to need these like tools as part of your tool belt to be able to use at different times in your journey to enlightenment. I'm going to be sharing with you Buddhist chanting. We're going to talk about the history of this, where it comes from, and then how you can use it today in order to benefit your practice. And then I'm going to actually teach you how to do it. And then ultimately, I'm going to share with you how to integrate everything that you've been learning this week into your day-to-day life. Because if we spend 5 days together and you listen to all the things that I have to share, you ask questions, you're interested in what it is that I'm sharing, and then you kind of go back to your life and just keep doing things the way that you have been doing, okay, it was a nice 5 days to spend with you, right? But if you integrate what you're learning into your day-to-day life, that's where you're going to really see the benefit. So that's why I spend some time at the end of the course helping you to see how to take what you've learned and then integrate it into your day-to-day life. So these are all the things that you're going to be learning as part of the course. Do you guys have any questions on any of this stuff? Yeah. Could you get a mic, Boulder? We have some people online joining us. I usually mention that oftentimes people don't have questions on this, but it's great that you do, Boulder. So I think most of you guys have been here before. If you guys have a question, you're welcome to get a mic. That way the people online will hear you. Those of you guys that are online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Very practical question. I love the program. But Friday, what time do you think will be finished Friday?
Normally we get back here around 5 o'clock, but it all depends on the traffic. So considering it's busy season, I've seen it go as late as 5:30 before, but somewhere around there.
Just so I know. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fine.
Okay. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this first topic with you. In chapter 19, this chapter is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. This is where I actually share the life story of the Buddha. Sometimes people ask me, like, why didn't you put that in the front of the book? Well, when the Buddha was asked during his lifetime, like, what could you really do to respect him? He said to learn and practice the teachings. That's the way to respect a teacher, is to learn and practice their teachings. He taught students that when they're learning his teachings and they're approaching his teachings, that they would be wise to learn with eager ears, actively listening, actively learning, right? Because that's the way you're going to actually be able to get to enlightenment. You need to do a certain amount of intellectual learning. You need to do reflection to independently verify his teachings. And then you need to practice his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life. That's how you actually learn, right? So the Buddha never put himself in the front, right? So here in chapter 19 is where I actually share a bit of the life story of the Buddha, because in the unenlightened state, it is very difficult for people to live in that unenlightened mind. And sickness, aging, and death tends to be very challenging times for an individual in the unenlightened state. Either your sickness, aging, and death, or the people around you, like your parents and people like this, when you're experiencing sickness, aging, and death for them, it can be a very challenging time for you. And these were actually motivators that motivated the Buddha to go on this journey to enlightenment. So that's why I titled this way, and that's why it's chapter 19. I've organized this talk into these sections where I'm going to share the birth of the Buddha, his early life. We're going to talk about his journey to enlightenment, and then we're going to talk about his teaching career. And ultimately, we're going to circle back and talk about sickness, aging, and death, because this was part of the motivators that motivated him to go on this journey to enlightenment. So normally when I'm teaching, I kind of pause at different times and open up for questions. But with this particular topic, it's usually best if I just teach it all the way through, and then I open up for questions at the end. So this individual who we refer to as the Buddha, he was actually born into a royal family. His name was Siddhartha Gotama, and his father was a king and his mother was a queen. And during this period of time, when the female was pregnant, what they would do as she was getting close to delivery is they would take her back to her homeland. So the king organized a caravan to take her back to where she was growing up, so that her parents and her siblings and people like this would be around her when she was delivering the baby. So there was this caravan that was organized to take her back to her homeland. And as she was in the journey back to her homeland, she goes into labor. And they stop the caravan, and she gets out and goes over to this tree, and she's holding on to the branch of this tree, trying to deliver the baby. The baby was having difficulties coming out of the normal birthing canal, so it ends up breaking through the side of the stomach. And because of this, his mother dies 7 days later. Today we would have just done a C-section and she would have been just fine. But 2,500 years ago, when Siddhartha Gotama was born, they didn't have that technology. He was born in 563 BCE, and he ends up dying in 483 BCE. So this this story is that he broke through the side of the stomach and his mother dies 7 days later. And they also had cultural protocols in place for this during the lifetime of Siddhartha Gautama, because it wasn't uncommon for women and or the child to actually die during childbirth. It was somewhat common, where today we have a lot better medical technology. We don't see this occurring so often. So the cultural protocols were that if you died during childbirth and your children lived, then your siblings would adopt them as their own children. So Siddhartha Gautama's mother had an older sister who adopted Siddhartha Gautama as her own child. So his aunt became his stepmother as part of his life. Now, at the time of birth, in the original teachings, in the original Pali Canon, the life story of the Buddha, they share this event that occurred. And I don't know that it's true, but I don't know that it's false either. I tend to think that it's not true, and I'll explain to you why. When he was born, it said that he walked 7 steps immediately after birth, and lotus flowers were blossoming under his feet, and he spoke and he said, "This will be my last birth." I don't think this part of the story is true, because if it was, the next part of the story wouldn't actually be needed. So the next part of the story is that the king, being interested to know what his son was going to become, he summoned advisors or fortune tellers. This was another common practice during this period of time, is to get these fortune tellers to tell you what your child was going to become. Well, if your child is born and they're walking right away and lotus flowers are blossoming under their feet and they're speaking, you would know this child's pretty special, right? You wouldn't need advisors to come tell you what they're going to become. Sometimes what happens is when someone does something as significant as a Buddha and they live, as their story is handed down from person to person, the story can be embellished, right? Because they're trying to make him look better than he actually was. But a Buddha has done things amazing, right? There's no need to embellish the story of a Buddha, but I think that's what occurred, because otherwise this next part of the story wouldn't be needed. But nonetheless, these advisors were brought in to talk with the king. There was 108 of them that came to talk with the king, and 107 of them shared with the king that his son was going to be a great monarch, a great ruler. He was going to be a leader, and he was going to expand his territory far and wide. And of course, the king's like, that's my boy. Okay, yeah, right? And then there was this last advisor, the 108th advisor came in, and he came to the king and he apologized to the king. He said, "Sir, I'm so sorry. I overheard those other advisors, and they're 100% accurate. Your son is going to be a great leader, but not the way that you think. He's not going to be a monarch. He's not going to be a king. He's not going to expand your territory in your kingdom." And his father didn't like this, right? The advisor basically told the king that his son was going to be a spiritual leader. So his father didn't like this news, and he decides he's going to try to sequester his son in the palace, keeping him in the palace for his entire life, because he thought that if he went out into the kingdom and he got involved in worldly affairs, that he might be interested to be a spiritual leader. So he was trying to kind of woo him into the ways of being a monarch, and he did this by lavishing him with gifts. He gave him like the very best fabrics to wear as clothing. He gave him the most amazing food that you could eat. He gave him amazing entertainment, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him. He thought that if he gave him all these things, that he would get hooked to this lifestyle of being a king and a monarch, and he wouldn't ever go do anything else, because it would be impossible for him to have that kind of lifestyle in any other way. So the king, if you can imagine the royal riches that he had, he just lavished his son with everything and anything that he could give to him. Well, at the age of 29, Siddhartha Gautama realizes that he's about to become the king, because at this period of time, you would become the king at the age of 30, and your dad would retire, and then they would live alongside of you and help you to become a better and better king, learning how to do that. So at the age of 29, he realizes he's about to become the king, and he's never even been outside the palace. And he thought, how could I rule over these people as a king if I've never even been in the kingdom to see what their life is like? So he decides to go outside the palace. Against his father's wishes and without his knowledge, he kind of goes outside the palace, and he takes with him his royal attendant. This is like his chief of staff, his main confidant. And he goes outside, and he has what's called the 4 observations. He sees sees a sickly person, an aging person, a dead corpse, and a roaming ascetic. And when he sees these things, it's very impactful to his mind. He sees the sickly person, that this person is ill and sick, and they're disgruntled and agitated, and so are their family members. And he sees what's going on over there, and he needs to turn to his royal attendant and say, what's happening? Why is this going on? Why are these people so upset and disgruntled? And his royal attendant is like, oh, those people, they're going to have difficulties getting the basic necessities to sustain life. This is why they're so disgruntled. And this has a real impact on Siddhartha Gotama because he didn't live that kind of life. If you grew up in a royal palace for 29 years, having everything and anything you can imagine, you'd probably think everybody lives that way. So when he saw these people struggling, it was real impactful to him. Then he sees an aging person, kind of an older, decrepit person, having difficulties walking, getting along, and he needs to turn to his royal attendant and ask what's going on over there because there's all this disgruntledness there as well. And his royal attendant explains to him, like, oh, this person's kind of older, they can't work, they're going to have difficulty sustaining their life, and this is what's happening there. And this also has a big impact on Siddhartha Gotama. Then he sees this dead body, this corpse, and he sees the family grieving and sorrowful around the dead corpse. And he needs to ask his royal attendant what's happening there. And it's essentially the same story, that this person's died, that the family's going to have difficulty sustaining themselves. And this also has a real big impact on Siddhartha Gotama. And he starts looking at the kingdom as full of misery and despair. And he ultimately sees this roaming ascetic, somebody who's given up worldly life in order to be able to seek a better understanding of life. And this person's off meditating, and he needs to ask his attendant, what's that person doing? And he's like, oh, that person, they're trying to figure out all of this stuff, all this sickness, aging, and death. They're trying to figure out why that occurs and how to escape out of it. And Siddhartha Gautama decides that's what he would like to do. That he felt like if he became the king, he would just be ruling over misery and despair. And he wasn't interested in doing that. So he was interested in helping the people escape out of that. So he decides he's going to go on this journey to try to figure out this sickness, aging, and death. So at the time, he has a wife and a young child, an infant child. So when he goes back to the palace, it's nighttime, and they're actually sleeping. And he decides he's going to leave in the middle of the night without waking them up. And he didn't understand his mind as much as he did by the time he left and actually got to enlightenment. But at that time, he understood that if he woke his family up and he said goodbye, he felt like he wouldn't be able to leave. He felt like he wouldn't be able to go on this journey to be able to help people. So he just kind of looks in on them and then just kind of leaves in the middle of the night. And he takes with him his royal attendant, and he takes his horse, his favorite horse, with him. And he leaves out of the royal palace. And at some point, as he's journeying away from the royal palace, he decides he's going to let his horse go, and he's going to let his royal attendant go. And he shared with him, hey, you've been really good to me. Here's some provisions for you. I don't need you to come with me any longer. So he starts kind of shedding these things. And he gets to this point where he cuts off his hair. He has this long, beautiful, flowing hair. This was a common thing during this time frame. If you were a member of the royal family, whether you were male or female, you would grow this really long, beautiful hair. This is how people knew you were a member of the royal family, because it was only the royal family that could have this long, beautiful, flowing hair. If you were like a laborer, or you were a person who was working as a farmer or something like this, you wouldn't be able to have this long, beautiful, flowing hair. It was only the royal family that had the resources and the time to be able to sit around and have servants, shampooing their hair and detangling their hair and brushing and combing their hair. So when you would go out into the kingdom with this long, beautiful, flowing hair, they knew you were a member of the royal family. Where today we just put the picture of the king all over and the queen all over the kingdom, and everybody knows who the king and the queen are. We put it on the money, right? But during that time, they didn't have that technology. So it was the long hair that indicated that you were a member of the royal family. So him cutting off this hair is like, I'm never going back, because nobody would ever think that he was actually the king, having grown his hair for 29 years and now cut it off, that if he tried to assume the throne and become the king, nobody would ever think he was actually the king. So that was like a way of saying, I'm never going back. But there's other things that are occurring by cutting off your hair. Whether you choose to cut off your hair or not as part of your journey to enlightenment is a personal choice for you. But there are other benefits, which you guys will learn about as part of your journey on the path and why people cut their hair as part of the journey to enlightenment. So nonetheless, he goes off on this journey and he ends up taking up training with teachers because he was interested in training his mind and getting to enlightenment. So he takes up training with this first teacher. And this teacher was claiming that it was that they had figured out how to get to enlightenment and that they could guide him to enlightenment. So they start teaching him and he starts learning. He hangs himself upside down from trees. He lays on beds of nails. He's piercing his body with metal implements. He's starving himself, right? This is what was being taught at the time. The thought was that if you could cause physical pain to the body and your mind could overcome this pain, that you would then get to enlightenment. So he does this for an entire year of all these types of practices. And he gets to the end of this 1 year and the teacher comes to him and says, you've mastered my teachings. You've learned everything I have to teach you. You can now share my teachings. And he realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the palace. So he decides to leave from this teacher. And he goes and studies with a second teacher. And the second teacher was essentially teaching him the same things, hanging himself upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, piercing his body with metal implements, starving himself. And he gets to the end of 1 year of training with this teacher, and the same thing occurs. This teacher says, you've mastered my teachings. I have nothing else to share with you. And he realized that he wasn't any closer to enlightenment than he was when he was in the palace. His mind is still experiencing discontentedness. So he's frustrated with the whole entire thing. And he decides that he's going to go off on his own. He feels like he wasted 2 years of his life. And he goes off on his own in the forest. But all he knows how to do is the same things that he had been doing. So he continues to do those kinds of things, even when he was off on his own. He takes it so far that he's eating 1 grain of rice per day. This is how he's trying to figure out, is this really the truth? Does this really work? So he's eating 1 grain of rice per day in order to sustain his body. Well, he's on the edge of the forest meditating. And there's this daughter and this mother that comes by, and they see he's basically skin and bones. His bones are protruding, his ribs are protruding. They can see that he's on death's doorstep. And they go to him and they beg and plead with him to take some rice and to eat some rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice and he starts eating the rice. And he has a realization in this moment that he realizes what we now refer to as the middle way. That when he was in the palace, he was indulging in all these sensual pleasures. He had everything and anything that he wanted while he was in the royal palace. But when he left, he swung all the way to the other side, where he was eating 1 grain of rice per day. And he realized none of these two extremes actually leads to enlightenment. So he started to discover what's called the middle way, where you do things in moderation and you come to the middle. And this is where his practice really starts to excel, and he starts to figure out how to get to enlightenment. He starts to really uncover how to train his mind, and because he realized that if he allowed the body to die, that he wouldn't be able to train the mind. So this is why he starts to eat, and he starts to discover this middle way, this moderation. And now he starts to discover all the teachings that it took for him to get to enlightenment. And he does this by himself without the help of any teachers or any guides. He ultimately gets to enlightenment after 6 years. So it's a total of 6 years. The first 2 years with those teachers that didn't lead to enlightenment, and then 4 years on his own. And he realizes he's gotten to enlightenment because his mind's completely peaceful, calm, serenely content with joy. He doesn't experience any discontentedness. There's no anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this is eliminated from his mind. But he understands that his teachings are vastly different than what anybody else was sharing at the time, because they were all sharing to disparage the body. And if you did this, then your mind would get to enlightenment. So he wasn't quite sure whether the world was ready for his teachings. So he hangs out at this tree. By the way, this story is all taking place where we talk about Nepal and Northeast India. That's where this is all taking place. That line between Nepal and Northeast India didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha, but today, of course, we refer to it that way. So Siddhartha Gotama, the Buddha, hangs out at this tree in Northeast India, contemplating whether or not he should actually share his teachings with the world. And he spends about 7 weeks at this tree. And ultimately, we know what he did is he actually shared his teachings, but it took him about 7 weeks to figure that out because he was also thinking about maybe going back to the palace, and maybe that would be a better option. So he ultimately ends up deciding he's going to share his teachings of what it took for him to get to enlightenment. So he decides to go back to the area where he was studying with those first 2 teachers. And when he does, he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when he encounters these people, they start laughing at him and joking him and mocking him. They thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment because they saw this healthy person with meat on their bones and looking bright and radiant and cheerful. And they thought they had given up on the path because for them, in order to get to enlightenment, you needed to be disparaging the physical body. You needed to be starving yourself. And when they saw that he had meat on his bones, they thought like he had given up on the path to enlightenment. But when he was being mocked and joked and laughed at, it didn't affect his mind because his mind was peaceful, it was joyful, he was enlightened. When people are doing those kinds of things, by the time you get to enlightenment, it doesn't affect your mind. So he just joyfully came over, sat down on the ground, he took his hand and he reached down and touched the earth. This is the one and only miracle that he performed, that when he touched the earth, all these animals came to where he was at. So there were squirrels and rabbits and birds and lizards and snakes and all these different things that were coming to where he was at. And these first 5 students, these first 5 people, they became his first 5 students where they are like, okay, you've got my attention. What do you have to share? And they sat down and he shared with them the 4 noble truths. He shared with them the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And the way that a Buddha's teachings work is they're independently verifiable. They're not based in belief. So those 5 people, hearing what he said about the 4 noble truths, were able to independently verify his teachings. And they could see that he indeed figured out how to get to enlightenment. So they become his first 5 students. And from there, his community just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. An individual who's a Buddha doesn't perform a bunch of miracles to convince people that they're actually a Buddha. Because their teachings are independently verifiable, they don't need people to know that they're an actual Buddha in order to be able to help the world. In fact, it's better if people don't know who a Buddha is. Because if everybody knew who a Buddha was, one of the real powers and strengths of a Buddha would be kind of like null and void. Because one of the things that a Buddha is able to do is they're able to observe the quality of a student's mind, and then they're able to offer them teachings. They can see the pollutions in their student's mind and then offer them teachings to be able to help them. So if everybody knew that he was a Buddha, like let's just say there was like a physical characteristic, like maybe the ears turned a certain way, or there's a certain mole that identified him as being a Buddha. Well, if everybody knew he was a Buddha, when they came around him, they'd kind of be on their best behavior whenever they'd see him. And now he wouldn't be able to see their natural mind. So a Buddha doesn't go around trying to convince people that they're an actual Buddha. They just teach their teachings. And their teachings are independently verifiable, so the students can figure out the path to enlightenment through independently verifying their teachings. And it retains this ability for the Buddha to be able to observe the quality of their students' mind and then be able to offer them teachings to actually help them to be able to progress towards enlightenment. So at this point, he teaches and he's sharing his teachings from the age of 35. That's when he gets to enlightenment, to the age of 80. And during this 45-year period, countless people are getting to enlightenment. Just countless people are getting to enlightenment due to his clarity of his teachings. And now at the age of 80, he dies. And he ends up dying of old age. That's what he dies from. Later, after his death, they end up documenting his teachings and preserving his teachings. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you will never forget the teachings that it took that led to your enlightenment. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's focused, you have concentration, clarity, you have deep memory. Essentially, your mind has been upgraded to this new operating system. And you'll never forget the teachings that it took for you to get to that enlightened mental state. So it was shortly after his death that the technology to write things down came into that region of the world, and they were able to start documenting his teachings. So about 500 of his students who were enlightened, they got together and they started documenting his teachings. There were countless people who were enlightened by the time of his death, but 500 of them got together and they agreed that this is his original teachings. And that's what we refer to today as the Pali Canon. That's the original source teachings of the Buddha. So this is his life story and his teaching career. This is the things that led to his sharing his teachings. It was this sickness, aging, and death that was the ultimate motivators, because he was interested in helping people escape this misery. And what he ultimately discovers is he discovers that the reason why the mind has so much difficulties during sickness, aging, and death is that it craves permanence, that the mind is craving permanence while you live in an impermanent world. So, for example, if the body is sick and you're craving permanent health, you'll be irritated and disgruntled and frustrated when you're experiencing sickness of the body. And this body is going to get sick. It's only a matter of time, right? So as long as we crave permanent health, when the body is sick, the mind doesn't like that. Or if you crave permanent youthfulness, when you're starting to experience aging and you don't move around as easy, maybe there's aches and pains that you didn't have before, right? These kinds of things are occurring. If you're craving permanent youthfulness, when things start changing with this body, you'll have disgruntledness and agitation and irritation and all these different feelings. The mind's craving permanence, craving permanent youthfulness. And then the same thing with death is that if you're craving permanent life, then when you're getting close to death, then the mind's going to be experiencing painful feelings. It's going to have a very difficult time with that because this life isn't permanent. Every single one of us will die at some point. So this is the ultimate discovery that the Buddha figures out, is that because of craving, desire, attachment, the mind craving permanence, that the mind experiences difficulties whenever there's change like this. So it's because of birth that we experience sickness, aging, and death. And by eliminating the causes and conditions that are producing the discontent feelings, then you eliminate the feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. And you'll also eliminate birth, continuing to be born in the world over and over and over again. Because if you can eliminate birth, you'll eliminate sickness, aging, and death, right? So these were the motivators and the things that really guided the Buddha towards this journey. And not only do people oftentimes have difficulties with their own sickness, aging, and death, but it's also the people around you. You might be craving for your mom and dad to be permanently healthy. And maybe when they're sick, you have struggles with that. Or maybe when you're used to seeing them as a kid look so youthful, when they age and you see them aging, it can be very impactful for you the first time you look at your parents and you realize they're getting old, right? Or when they're getting close to death, this can be a very challenging time for you. Your grandparents, your parents, all that's happening here is the mind is craving permanence when you live in an impermanent world. And the Buddha discovers this and ultimately comes back to the area where he was originally at with those initial students, but he also comes back to close to his kingdom. His wife ends up ordaining with him. His son ends up ordaining with him, his stepmother. Sometimes people think that the Buddha left his family and he never went back. This isn't actually true. You can see in the teachings that his wife ends up getting to enlightenment, his son gets to enlightenment, his stepmother gets to enlightenment. So he actually came back and there was different members of the royal family coming to join him and he was helping them to be able to get to enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions on the life story of the Buddha? Do you have a question or more? More than one? Yeah, go for it.
Okay, a few questions. First of all, the Pali Canon, how much time passed between Buddha's death and that being written, the 500?
So they had what's called the first Buddhist council within about 3 to 6 months after the death of the Buddha. the individuals that were there, one of the most predominant ones was one of his main students named Ananda. This individual was with him from pretty much when he first started teaching all the way through his entire teaching career for 45 years. This person is reportedly to be either his brother-in-law or his cousin or something like this. And this individual was with him through his entire teaching career. And he was really credited for having the best memory of what the Buddha taught, because he was there with the Buddha all the way through his teaching career, and he had a very deep, profound memory. So in the Pali Canon, you can see that Ananda is referenced frequently because he's the one who had the deepest memory to be able to remember the teaching. So the Pali Canon has a lot of situations where the Buddha is talking to Ananda and teaching Ananda. So the first Buddhist council happened within 3 to 6 months after the death of the Buddha. But the Pali Canon that we refer to as the Pali Canon, we know that it originated about 1200 to 1300 years ago. So there was something that existed from that period of time of when Ananda and all the other enlightened beings were documenting the teachings up to the Pali Canon. We thought for a long time that the Buddha spoke Pali, but this isn't actually true. There's been recent discoveries that they found some remnants of documents that were the original teachings of the Buddha that predate the Pali language. There's this other language that was being used. So for a long time, people thought the Buddha used Pali, but he actually didn't. There was this language prior to Pali that he was using, but they were just remnants of what they found. It wasn't a complete collection of his teachings. So there was some type of documentation that was going on for the first 12 to 1300 years after his death. But the Pali Canon that we refer to, that kind of line in the sand, is about 1200 to 1300 years ago. So while we call it the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha, and it's 45 volumes that is this big, not everything the Buddha taught is in the Pali Canon. We know that because we can see places where it says that he was recommending loving kindness meditation, for example, to eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will and all the lesser versions. But there's never a place in the Pali Canon where you actually see how he did loving kindness meditation. It's just not there. We know that he taught it because we see it referenced in the Pali Canon, but exactly what he did is not there. So there's been some impermanence with his teachings. And that's why it's one of the reasons why it's important to have a teacher to guide you. You wouldn't be able to just read the Pali Canon and get to enlightenment. There's certain things that are in the Pali Canon that were not taught by the Buddha because of impermanence. And there's certain things that the Buddha taught that isn't in the Pali Canon. So you really need to be working with a teacher who is either enlightened or very close to enlightenment in order to be able to help you get to enlightenment. Because whatever that teacher is doing, whatever practices they have that have led to their mental state, then that's what's going to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. So this Pali Canon originates 12 to 1300 years ago, but we know it's not 100% exactly what the Buddha taught. That would be impossible because of impermanence, right? So the way you cut through that to be able to know what is true and what is false is you never believe what it is that you see in the Pali Canon. Never believe it. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You need to be able to learn, investigate, and examine. You need to be able to reflect on those teachings to verify whether they're true or false. And then you need to practice them, integrating them into your day-to-day life. And that's what's going to help you to be able to cut through the impermanence and be able to see what is true and what is false. Mm-hmm. Any other questions you guys have? And by the way, while we're talking about the Pali Canon, one of the things that I encourage people to do is not only to study the Pali Canon, but to have reliable translations. There's a lot of different translations in the world, and you're going to find that they're not all the same, right? There's places that you can see some translators, they've translated the words of the Buddha where he's talking to somebody, and they have him documented as saying things like, "You stupid fool." An enlightened being doesn't talk that way. But this unenlightened translator who's translating this language of a fully, perfectly enlightened Buddha, they talk that way. And now they see those words that are being used and they think that's what that means because the Pali language is no longer a spoken language today. So people have lost the meaning of what those words mean. So this individual who's unenlightened translating the words of a Buddha, they're going to document him as saying, "You stupid fool." And if you read this and you think that's the way a Buddha speaks, that's probably the way you're going to speak too, right? And I can assure you that you'll never get to enlightenment going around calling people stupid fools, right? You're going to produce all kinds of unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. So you need to be sure you have reliable translations. The Buddha never referred to anybody as a stupid fool once he was an actual Buddha. He might have said, "Oh, this is unwise," or "this is an unwise thought." He might have said something like that, but he would never refer to someone in a degrading or disparaging way. So it's important to have reliable translations. I can assure you the translations that I have here are reliable. This is what you need to be able to make your way to enlightenment. The more you dig into them, you'll see that for yourself. But just know that there's many different translations out there, and they're not all the same. So you'd like to be sure to have reliable translations when you're learning. Okay, let me see if we have any questions online here. Okay, I don't see any questions online. All right, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to stop here for a break. It's 10:15. Let's take a 20-minute break, give you guys a chance to meet each other, talk, stretch your legs, use the bathroom. If you need a snack, there's plenty of places around that you guys can get some snacks and stuff. So I'm going to start back up at 10:35. And when I do, I'm going to share this next topic of enlightenment. What is enlightenment? Helping you to understand this mental state so that then you can more easily navigate your way to it when you understand what it is. So enjoy your break, and I'll see you afterwards. Okay? So thank you so much. Mm-hmm.